Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Ed podcast. I thank everyone out there for joining us. I love the opportunity to get on the air and talk about all things restaurant tech, and today is no different. I am joined by a technologist, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how we met and then really a little bit about what he gets to do for a living. So, Santi, you want to introduce yourself to our audience real quick?
Sure. I'm Santi Cuellar. I am the senior manager of product marketing for Fusion Connect, where we're a collaboration and communications company. I'm also the co-host of the award-winning. I can say that now. Once you win an award, you can say you're
Love
award-winning.
it.
So I am co-host of Tech on Mute, which is a technology podcast.
Love it.
You're right. How we met is we were promoting our podcast, which has been running for about a year, grassroots efforts. We did some quirky videos to help drive subscriptions, like trying to predict the lottery with AI, like crazy stuff like that. But we talk about technology. And one of the things that we're passionate about and we've had success in is in the restaurant slash retail space.
Mhm.
And then I'm just searching one day on LinkedIn, came across your post, your profile, came across your podcast. And then when I went to see your podcast, I'm like, man, there's a lot of synergies here. We should collaborate. And so that's how we ended up here, honestly.
I love it. And I know you and I were talking about it pre-show as we were prepping. The thing that we often talk about, because I live in kind of the POS world and all of the things that are related to POS and transactions and interfaces and all of those kind of things. So much of that rides on the network,
Oh yeah.
on the applications that you guys get the privilege of. And all too often, it's an afterthought for the restaurants. And so let's walk through what you guys do at Fusion Connect at a broad stroke, and then we'll dig into where you guys are seeing not only success, but where you guys are even seeing opportunities within the restaurant vertical.
Sure. You nailed it, right? It's like nowadays, the network is now an essential part of it's a puzzle,
Mhm.
right? It's a puzzle. That foundational piece has to be the network. Where before, depending on the retail, we at Fusion Connect, we bundle in one bucket. When we look at the market, we say restaurant retail
Mhm.
because they are different, but they share so many of the same challenges and they actually draw from each other a little bit. The distinctions between the two are actually very small. So when you hear me say restaurant slash retail, that's how we bucketize it on our end because that's how we see it. But in that space, the network was an afterthought. You
Mhm.
nailed it. Why? Because it was seen as it's that thing we use at the end of the shift when we have to send back the sales data to somebody and it didn't matter if it was down and who cares. And that changed pretty quickly.
Yep.
And I think the pivotal moment for this particular vertical and all verticals, but this one in particular was the pandemic. And it turned what used to be plain old boring, yes, got to have it, but who cares? Network to, oh no, we got to have not only the network, we have to have the best network. We have to have the right bandwidth. We have to be able to prioritize traffic. We never talked about these things
Mhm.
before. Now we're talking about it. And so, yes, you're right. It shifted. And I think the pandemic played a major role in that.
To our comments, both pre-show and what you just said, is people underestimate the quality of it. And when it's not working,
Mm,
how badly it can impact your guest experience and your step experience. And on the flip side, how much it can help when it's just rock solid.
yeah.
Walk me through the different elements of the network. Because people say network and I tease my wife and kids because it's like the Wi-Fi is not working. It's not really the Wi-Fi that's not working. It's the internet that's not
Right.
working in the house. And so there's lots of different
Yeah.
elements and it is something hard. And I love to educate our listeners to all the
Mhm.
different components because Wi-Fi is very different than internet into the
That's
building
correct.
and all of that. So I'd love to
Yes.
have you, since you live in this world every day, educate our listeners on the different components of the network because the router versus the switch versus the Wi-Fi or all of three different things. Talk me through
Yeah.
just the basics from the outside of the walls to the inside of the walls to the wireless and all of the different components, because then we can start to talk through how and why those things are impacting restaurant operations, retail operations and stuff.
Sure. Let's start with what's called the wide area network. And the largest wide area network that exists is the internet.
Mhm.
The internet is that public wide area network, right? There's no boundaries to the internet, no logistical or physical boundaries. So that internet connection has to come into your building. You need to have enough bandwidth suitable for the application. A lot of people think that when you say application, you're talking about a software piece. Yes, that's part of it. But we're talking about policies. We're talking about the intended use
Hmm.
of the bandwidth. You got to take that into consideration. Are you going to be streaming? Are you going to be making calls? Are you going to be broadcasting? Once you're inside the walls, right? You have what's called a local area network, right? Typically, that's created by what's called a switch. And what happens there is that's where all your computers and all your devices that require bandwidth connect to.
Hmm.
So imagine you have all these things connecting inside the walls because they want to take advantage of that internet connection. You can do that through a hard wire, literally a physical connection, or you can do that through a wireless component. We call it Wi Fi, right? But guess what? That adds a layer of complexity because you got to have a strong Wi Fi signal, right? Not only that, when you have something that's connected to a physical wire, to the internet, you have what's called full duplex. That means that you can send and receive data at the same time.
Hmm.
Is what's called half duplex. That means that you can only send or receive. You can't send and receive at the same time. This is why folks sometimes, when they see that their Wi-Fi connection is slow, they switch to a hardwire and they're like, wow, now they're flying. But yeah, that's because one is full duplex, one is half duplex. So long as we understand that and we give you the right Wi-Fi equipment and bandwidth and speeds to handle the half duplex nature of Wi-Fi, then you're fine. So that means you got to have the right repeaters placed in the right locations. Make sure if you need to boost the signal,
Hmm.
but that's inside the walls. Now we have another problem. That is when you have to speak to another location, you're going to want to prioritize what kind of traffic needs to go first because everything is competing for that one bandwidth. If you're trying to make like a video call or a voice call over the internet, if you're not prioritizing that type of traffic, you're going to get a bad experience. And so that's where things like SD-WAN, which is a technology, it stands for software defined wide area network, right? What it does is helps you shape what your network should look and perform, right? And so that's how we're able to do that. And it would prioritize certain traffic. So yeah, this is how, what am I thinking about when I'm trying to build the right network? Because you're right, network is just a broad statement, but what does it mean? These are the elements that we take into consideration and we try to right size for customers' businesses.
And
Hope
so
hope that helps.
yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I appreciate you taking time because oftentimes the restaurants are like, wait, you know, or my
Yeah,
streaming TVs don't ever work, or I can't get good voice
yeah,
calls into my building. And oftentimes it's because they haven't configured their network properly, which is why I wanted you to go through that. But you talked about bandwidth real quick, and I like to use the analogy: you've got a hose. And you can only get a certain amount of water through that hose. And the more bits of water that are going through it, the more things that are trying, the traffic that's going through that, or a freeway. You've got 5 lanes on the freeway. If you fill it up with cars, you're not going to be able to push any
right.
more data through there. And the second piece that I heard you say that I think is critical again for our listeners to think about is depending upon what you have in your network and what its requirements are, requires how you're going to configure these things. And so we talked
Right.
about a pre-show. We've got a customer that's got 50 TVs. Those 50 TVs, if they're all going to be streaming, you have to
Yeah.
define what those things are. And
Right.
oftentimes it's really hard because restaurants need to be agile. They need to be, you talked about the pandemic really, and retailers, they need to be agile, but they also need to make sure that they're thinking through these things. And so talk me through a little bit more, Santi, about some of the areas of opportunity where you're hearing and seeing people struggle in the area of network design and network architecture, primarily wrapped around communication, voice communication, chat, and all of that. Because I think more and more people are struggling to figure those things out. And they need to
Yeah.
define it.
So I'll tell you, probably the best way to approach this topic is share with you some of the shifts that I have seen specifically in the restaurant and retail business, because it's going to touch on a lot of what you're honing in on. What has happened is we've seen this shift started during the pandemic, but it didn't go away. In other words,
Hmm.
the changes they made and they adopted are now mainstays. They are not going anywhere.
Yep.
And if anything, they're expanding on it.
Yep.
The good news is we've gotten better at streaming, meaning that like a network engineer will know how much bandwidth they're going to need for a good call, how much bandwidth they're going to need for a streaming device, how much. So the good news is streaming and voice over IP and collaboration and video conferencing has gotten so good that it's actually a lot easier for a network engineer once they understand how many people you have, how many devices you have, they can actually tell you how to right fit your bandwidth. Thank goodness, because back in the day, it wasn't all standardized,
Oh,
and
it
so
was
you can
not.
get different.
The amount of grainy voice over IP calls
Yeah,
you had, the amount of
yeah,
latency
yep,
and all of that was a big
yeah,
deal. It fortunately the
yeah.
tech has gotten better, but so have the requirements of the people that are trying to use
That's
that
right.
same. So
Yeah,
it's a
that's right.
race.
But what I have seen is, and as a company, Fusion Connect, right? We focus mainly on collaboration and communications. We saw quickly, and it was surprising. We saw quickly the adoption of what we call omni-channel,
Uh-huh.
meaning the omni-channel customer experience. What does that mean? That means that a restaurant who their bread and butter was, no pun intended, was to open their doors and have people come and sit in the restaurants, now find themselves saying, "Oh, we can't open to the public." They had to reinvent themselves overnight. They had to now find ways, you probably remember this.
Oh yeah.
They were taking calls and having curbside pickup,
Yes.
right?
I got PTSD thinking about it.
It happened overnight, right? And nobody knew, what do we do? We don't have the infrastructure. How do we pull this off? And by the way, it was terrible because if you think about it, the person who's at the curbside trying to handle your food, you say, "Oh, you guys got this order wrong." How are they going to communicate to the back kitchen
Uh-huh.
that they need to fix something? Now they have to, somebody needs to run back. There was no, they just didn't have a system in place to meet the need at the
Uh-huh.
time. And so one of the things they did to try and mitigate that is they started to look at omni-channel options. What is an omni-channel? An omni-channel is a channel in the communication world, or especially in the contact center world, is a way of touching a customer. That's what it is. It's one avenue, right? So if you physically come into my store, that's actually one channel. But if you text me on your phone, that's another channel. And if you're on, let's say, Facebook, and all of a sudden you're messaging our company through Facebook, that's another. That is what omnichannel is. It is a way for us to touch customers where they find themselves.
Uh-huh.
Some people were on the phone, some people were on the website trying to communicate. Omnichannel helped alleviate that because they were able to meet customers where they were. But not only that, they were able to meet customers where they were, take their requests, take their orders, but through the same platform, they were able to communicate with each other. So if you had that scenario where, hey, you got my order wrong,
Yes.
they can send a message quickly to somebody in the back kitchen and say, hey, we got to fix this order. And within 30 seconds, somebody's coming up with the correction. The next car comes up and it just keeps flowing. We thought that was going to be a band aid or a temporary thing that they did. No, they've changed their business. And this is what, because if you want an omni-channel customer experience, guess what you need? A solid network.
And now a word from one of our sponsors. Every restaurant operator understands the chaos of a restaurant kitchen during the meal rush. Restaurant Technologies Total Oil Management Solutions is an end-to-end automated oil management system that delivers, filters, monitors, and recycles your cooking oil, taking the dirtiest jobs out of your kitchen and letting your employees focus on more important tasks. Control the kitchen chaos with Restaurant Technologies and make your kitchen safer. No upfront cost. To learn more, check out rti-inc.com or call 888-796-4996.
And you need technology to be able to enable that. Going
Absolutely.
back to
Absolutely.
being able to do voice, being able to do chat, being able to do all of these different ways. You said it early in the pandemic, both consumers and staff members got to a place where they got used to certain things. And as humans, we're creatures of habit oftentimes. And so but
Yeah,
then once we start doing these things, it's like, I don't want somebody to take it away from me. And so they have to
that's
keep
right.
those things going, whether that's the consumer interacting with the brand or the brand interacting in and amongst itself.
There was a study made that says that 66% of customers who shop both online and in person are more satisfied than those who only shop through one channel. That was what sold the restaurant and retail business to consider keeping what they did. Wait a minute. We started this whole omni-channel thing to address an immediate need, but we're reaping benefits. Why are we changing this? No,
Mhm.
let's keep it. How do we grow it? And that's a big number. The same study says that omni-channel customers shop 1.7 times more
Yep.
than single channel shoppers.
Yep. No,
It's
and we say it often on the show. Everybody wants you to interact with them where they want to do business with you
where they want to do business.
when they want to do business. Because for me, when my
There
wife
you
is
go.
out of town with the kids, I interact with the brand differently than when I'm home with the wife and kids. So across the board, the restaurants, it's incumbent upon the restaurants to enable that guest experience, and you can only do it through tech that enables you to do that. Right. Sanji, talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing from a staff perspective, because the staff also is
Yeah.
starting to expect these things. We talked a little bit about it pre-show. What is the staff expecting from their? It's hard enough to find people in retail and
Yeah.
in restaurants, and then when you give them a crap piece of technology that doesn't work or doesn't allow, they're getting strained out because the guests don't get what they want, and they lose staff members because of it. Or they come in and say, "What
Well,
tech are you using? We're
that's
not
right.
coming here." Talk to me a little bit about
That's
what you
right.
guys are seeing with these places you guys are working with.
A little deja vu because we always have to go back a little bit and see what happened to understand why we are where we are today. But in 2022, from January to April, so do the
Couple
math,
months,
that's
yeah.
just 4 months. Okay. From January to April in 2022, more than 2.7 million retail workers quit their jobs. Okay.
A lot.
We remember this because we never thought that we would see the day where a McDonald's or a Burger King was offering a bonus
To come
for
work there.
people to come. Two things happen. One, millennials were now old enough to have director, VP, and C suite titles.
Mhm.
And remember, millennials were born with technology in hand. By the way, I am Gen X. We're the ones who brought you the internet. We brought you the smartphones.
Love
We
it.
brought you the technologies. So you're welcome.
I was just thinking about sales staff this morning. I was like, I remember a day when there weren't kiosks at the airport. I remember a day
That's
where you
right.
had to walk up, and now I don't ever talk to anybody at the airport when I got to fly somewhere. So
That's right. That's
very
right.
familiar with that as well.
I started in this industry in 1995 during the dot-com era. But millennials who came after us were born into the stuff that Gen X created. And I say that kiddingly, but the reality is true. And so there was an expectation from millennials to have certain technology and certain tools at hand, like it was standard practice. Guess what? Gen Z is entering the workspace.
Mhm.
They have higher technical demands than the millennials did. And what we're finding is that hiring and retaining is becoming a challenge for companies who have not optimized and modernized their traditional brick and mortar setup
Absolutely.
because they're expecting to walk in and have the right tools, the right technologies so that they can be more effective. They know what it means to be productive because they're in that technology mix. And when they walk into an environment that is missing pieces, they rather go work for the next store
Mhm.
or the next restaurant that's going to pay them $2 less an hour, but they're going to get more done because they have less headaches and the employee experience now matters,
Yep.
right? We saw that shift. We weren't expecting that, honestly. It just happened and we're like, wow, it's very interesting, but I can see why.
Yeah. No, and again, restaurants by and large are struggling to get staff members across the globe. And with that, when they come in and they're not only their attention span, but they're okay with it not working at first as long as you're trying. But if you're not trying, they have no patience for
Yeah.
you. They're out. They won't show up for their second shift.
Growing your business can mean big time logistical questions like how am I going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you can take orders on your website, via app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of the Uber Courier network will pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customers' doorsteps. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Check out uberdirect.com to learn more.
This
That
is
kind of
true.
thing.
This is true.
So
And that brings me to innovate. I mentioned
yeah,
innovating, right? That's another shift, right? I talked about how if you're a traditional brick and mortar, you're not innovating, you're not going to attract. So we've seen some really cool innovations in the traditional brick and mortar space. Smart checkout carts or the self-service kiosk and
hmm
experience, which as a Gen Xer and a technologist, I actually have a hard time because I love the human interaction. When you spend, right, 5 days a week, right, the entire day solving technology problems, thinking about the next big thing and everything else. When you actually log off, you don't want
yeah, you want
technology.
you want to have a guest experience.
I really do. And so when I go into a restaurant and I see the kiosk, I'm like, oh, I really want to talk to somebody right now. But I understand the kiosk because the majority of people aren't like me. They want that quick and easy. They actually probably don't want to talk to somebody.
hmm
We saw a lot of not just the kiosk and the whole smart card and the contactless payment, but think about this. Okay, if you walk into a Starbucks, you're expected to get Wi-Fi.
Yep.
But that was not the case before when you walk to another restaurant. Like restaurants didn't have guest Wi-Fi. But guess what? I now have a contactless payment system. I want my guests to look at our online menu by scanning a QR code. Okay, what if you have bad cell signal and they can't read your menu?
hmm
You have to provide guest Wi-Fi. So we started seeing, honestly, just about every retail and restaurant chain taking guest Wi-Fi as an essential piece of the network because of these things.
Yep,
It
it's
was
part of Yelp, it's part of Google reviews that say, do they have these things? For me, when I will go to different brands based on I'm traveling by myself, I'm cruising on the road, and I need to go work for a couple
Yep,
hours. I make sure I find a place that has Wi-Fi
absolutely.
and say it's a driver for me. Not done well, I won't go back to that brand.
There you
If
go.
it's and this is part of where I wanted you to talk through. People will say, "Oh, I have guest Wi-Fi." We were joking actually. I was at that same client that's got 50 TVs yesterday, and
Yeah.
even publishing your guest Wi-Fi, and I'm gonna ask you to talk a little bit about QoS, and you know what the word QoS means, but
Yeah.
help our listeners understand why it's
Yeah.
so critical. One, you've got one portion of bandwidth. It might be on two channels, it might be on a single channel into your building,
Yeah.
but then you want to prioritize the different quality of service, voice, POS, transactions, televisions, and guests oftentimes are on the back half of that. So
Yeah.
talk to me even again about why that's so critical to think through those things because just having Wi-Fi is table stakes, but having Wi-Fi that works well is what's going
Yeah,
to
I
drive
know.
people to do
Yeah.
that. And people will just throw it up. And then there's also the security aspect of it. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's talk
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
QoS first. And then we'll talk through security and
So
why that's so critical.
the bad practice is to have everybody on the same Wi-Fi network.
Sorry, I'm
Done.
laughing. It happens way too often.
Correct. And that's why I brought up in the forefront, right? Because they're trying to cut corners, they're trying to save money. I get that, but there is inherent flaws with having one Wi-Fi network that's going to interface with your operations and your guest experience. It should not be the same. They should be separate, right?
Mhm,
The other thing is your prioritization, your quality of service really should live on your operational side,
mhm.
right? And you should be able to give your guest enough Wi-Fi bandwidth to where they won't notice any hiccups. So if they do want to make a video call, it's not like you have 100 people making a video call, right? So the first thing is separate the two networks. By the way, you can have enough internet bandwidth coming into the building, but the Wi-Fi network should be separate. And there are different ways of doing the Wi-Fi piece. Like you can have a pre-shared key with guests. Problem with that is you have to change it, or what some folks are doing now is they have more of an enterprise grade where on the operational side it ties right into their network, into their Active Directory. Their users are able to log in, and on the guest side, they give them a splash page with it's a more cleaner experience. There's no pre-shared key. No, just come in, make sure that you understand what our policies are, and then we're going to give you good quality bandwidth because you're my guest. Go enjoy it. Oh, by the way, while you're on the splash page, I have 50% off the next thing.
Capture
So,
your email address to talk with you. And again, talk
right.
about the splash page real quick, Santi, because I think, again, I find too many restaurants don't think about this and then they get caught. because
Yes,
people are sitting there doing inappropriate things in their dining room or whatever else. So what does the splash
yeah,
page do? Explain that a little bit, because again, not done properly, it ends up hurting the brand,
it
hurting
does.
the guest experience, all of it.
It does. Yeah, I mean, the splash page is basically it is the gate that you put up before you release your guest into this guest Wi-Fi, right? And so it's like a gated factor. And the splash page comes up. Typically, they put in their name, an email address. Sometimes they want to capture zip code, so they do that too. You can actually customize the splash page to capture whatever customer data you want, but less is more.
Eh,
Like, if you're gonna have them fill out an entire form, they're probably not gonna
yep.
use your service. But if it's just an email address and maybe a zip code, and they're fine. They'll do that all day long. But what's important about the splash page is 2 things. 1, now you have a captive audience, because in order for them to use your free guest Wi-Fi, they have to stop at the splash page. That is a good time for you to advertise
Eh,
to your customer, because you wanna, by the way, it's a channel.
yeah, it's another way to
You're
communicate with their
touching
guests and let
you're
them know who
touching
you
your
are and what your
customer.
brand is, what you're looking for.
Yeah. And then, of course, embedded in this is the legal piece, right? The policy, the use policy, because you have to also empower the business to be able to take action on somebody who is misusing the guest Wi-Fi, which is being offered for free. If you're in a restaurant, you're at a Starbucks, and you're sitting next to a family and they got little kids, and you're pulling up inappropriate content, that's not cool.
Yep.
And
Hate
so,
content,
so,
porn, whatever, all of it. You got to have that as part of your
but,
policy.
and so now, because somebody said, "Hey, I want to use your internet," I'm checking off that I agree. Now you've empowered your employee to say, "Hey, sir, that's not something we accept." Otherwise, they won't have a leg to stand, but they can now enforce the policy that they agreed to. By the way, they can also shut off that user. So if they're not willing to say, "I'm sorry, it was an accident, I won't do it again," whatever the case is, you can actually shut that specific user from using your guest
Mhm.
Wi-Fi. And you want that because it's a liability.
Yep.
Like, you could potentially be held liable for something that a guest is doing. So it plays a major role, and it's also a good way of touching customers and advertising. It's a good thing to have.
Awesome. Talk to me a little bit about security, because again, we had a guest on, Todd Myers from Go. I don't remember Todd's company's name. I'll put it in the show notes, but he does just manage Wi-Fi networks for people. But he talks a little bit about how he'll go into a brand, jump on their guest Wi-Fi, and then can see all of their POS devices, can see everything that's going on in the network because they've not configured it properly. Talk to me a little bit about how companies like yours and others that do it well segment these things, not just for quality of service for the staff and all of that, but also to ensure that they're not playing in the wrong sandbox that they shouldn't be in.
So the scenario that you just described is one scenario. There's another scenario that's similar but different. It was happening during the same era, during the same time period, where people were going to hotels because they just couldn't get work done at home because they weren't set up yet for that. And the hotels were being flexible, letting people come in and use Wi-Fi. Here's what a hacker would do. A hacker would go and park nearby and start to promote a Wi-Fi network that sounded almost identical to the hotel's Wi-Fi network.
Mhm.
And people, because they were in a rush or they were on the phone, picked the wrong one. And now they have this hacker in their laptop. And by the way, that wasn't the hotel's fault, because they actually, hotels are pretty good at separating operational Wi
Yep.
Fi from guest Wi Fi. So it wasn't that. It was just somebody said, "Hey, I can use this." So security is a two-way street. There is the things that we have to do as corporations, as companies, to make sure that our employees and our guests are safe. But there's also a human firewall element that a user has to learn. We live in a digital age. Can't blame the companies for everything that happens, because guess what? You were the one who clicked on that link.
Yeah.
You weren't supposed to. So that is, unfortunately, we live in a digital age. It is a two-way street. Security is a partnership. It is the corporations trying to keep their employees and their guests safe from a data breach perspective. But it also requires that the people who are using the network have some basic knowledge of, this is probably not something I want to click on.
Yep.
It's where we live. I will say that It's a big deal. During that whole time frame, what we saw, there was a study done. It was done by the National Retail Federations, actually. They did a study, and they said that 69.4% of respondents reported that the COVID-19 pandemic, that whole era, resulted in an increase of fraud, crime, and overall risk for their company.
I can see that.
When something is happening in the world, bad people are going to take advantage.
Mhm.
And we saw that. I gave you one example. The guy would park outside and promote an SSID. I'm sorry, a
A
Wi-Fi
Wi-Fi,
ID.
yeah.
Now he was stealing all your information and you had no idea. Restaurant retail, while they were concerned about security, before it was not like front and center.
Mhm.
It was almost like the network. It was like it was an afterthought, but they also knew that they had to be careful because they seen others
Would have gotten
fail.
hacked from. Yep.
The the domino effects from that were devastating for that company. But let me tell you, with all this omni-channel,
That was
with
really where
all
I wanted
this
to go.
innovation,
Yeah, that was really where I
yeah,
wanted to go. Is this so now, Santi, talk to me about my last thread that I wanted to go through is this constantly restaurant operators, restaurant owners, people are constantly looking to modify their environment to meet a guest requirement, whether that's a
yeah,
loyalty solution, whether that's a third-party delivery solution, whether that's some other new thing, kiosks. Why is it so critical? You have to be able to innovate to meet the guest needs and be able to meet your staff
you
needs.
have
Talk to me about some best practices that you would suggest restaurants consider as it relates to this, because you got to be able to be innovative. You got to be able to do things, but not done properly. You're ultimately going to hurt your brand, potentially hurt all of those
100%.
things.
So let me just first start off by saying that securing a network has become easier from a technology standpoint. What I mean by that is back in the day, you needed to get a firewall, but then you also needed something for malware. And then you needed something to detect an intrusion. When you looked at a network
Mhm.
topology for security, you had firewalls and appliances stacked up. You had to make them redundant. So now you had a whole other set. It was a nightmare. And you have to keep everything updated and antivirus, intrusion protection, and intrusion detection. Sometimes they were separate, sometimes they were together. And so that world has also innovated.
Mhm.
And so where before you needed this complex topology, now you have everything: antivirus, anti-malware, intrusion detection, protection, firewall rules, you name it, one box. Okay. Which makes it easy from a topology, from a management perspective, from a planning perspective, from a budget perspective. And if you have to make that box redundant, which you should, now you just had a second box.
Mhm.
So good news is that sector of technology has been catching up significantly. And now, with artificial intelligence proactively looking at anomalies in the network and catching things that the humans would eventually catch.
Yeah, but a little faster.
Right. We know stories where people were hacked on a Friday and nobody knew till Monday.
Mhm.
And so AI is starting to play a huge role of catching these things immediately and blocking them. And by the way, AI is starting to do it proactively, meaning they actually will block it and then tell you about it.
Yeah.
Hey, guess what? I took care of it. So good news. Not only has the technology caught up, but the technology is available for small, medium, enterprise sized businesses. There is something out there for everyone. So it has gotten better, but they had to change. They had to get caught up. Why? Because of everything we just talked about. So if you're a restaurant today, if you're a retail company today, number one, you have to fortify, ready for this? The protection of credit card and personal data. That's number one.
Mhm.
You have you have to. By the way, did you I saw something pop up on my phone yesterday. I haven't read up on it because I've been so busy. But something popped up about uh 22.7 billion social security numbers
It did.
got
I saw
leaked.
that.
And like I said, I don't have the details, but there you go.
Yep. No, it was, yeah, it was a lot of social security numbers that got hacked. And so everybody's saying you got to go do check your credit scores and all of that. Yep.
I just saw the headline and I'm like, I need when something like that happens, I need time to really absorb what happened, analyze it. That's just a technologist in me. So that's why I haven't really looked at it. But the first thing I said is 2.6 billion. But there's only 350 million people. Where are all these social security? So I'm guessing that these are all the social securities have been assigned from the beginning of people who even passed away and everything. I don't know. It's crazy. The number is just nuts, right?
Mhm.
But it happens. If you are living in the digital age, you will get hacked. Period. All we can do is mitigate it, number one. And number two, how you respond to when it happens, that's the key.
Yep.
That's the key. That's speed, right? Speed and accuracy and transparency because it's going to happen. It's just going to happen. X had a DDoS attack,
Violence
and now,
services
and now
they
service.
took him down.
Yeah, they took him down. So anybody who tells you I can secure your network, you will not be hacked, run the other way because what we do as technologists is we do our darnest to make it so hard for somebody to come into your network that we mitigate the risk.
Mhm.
But there is no way to say ever that we can 100% secure a network. And by the way, it's constantly evolving.
Mhm.
The hackers get smarter. By the way, just like we have AI that protects networks, we have AIs that attack
That's
networks.
it.
So,
Well, that's really where I wanted to end things, Santi, for today, as it relates to technology. Is people need to be able to innovate, and they need to be careful. They can't just say
yeah,
anybody that just started a company last week. Oh, let me get into your network, and I'm going to go start seeing your POS data. I'm going to start inserting orders, and you have no idea where they
no,
came from. You have no idea what they have access to. So be really careful. The second piece that I would say is if you aren't already working with companies like Santi's company, you have to in today's day and age, because so many things touch the inside of that four walls that are
yes,
really your lifeblood. They're the things that are making money. They're the things that are driving your family and your business and the lives of those people. You have to ensure that you do it properly because ultimately, if you don't, somebody's going to find you, some hacker's going to get in and they're going to harm your livelihood. And yes,
yeah,
you've got insurance and you've got all these other things. Ultimately, we got hacked a couple of years ago. It was so painful. We shut down servers. We were months and trying to figure it out.
yeah,
So, how do people in with a brand like yours? What should they look for in companies like what you
yeah,
guys do? Because there's lots of organizations out there that do a lot of what you guys do. Fantastic
correct.
world. Every geo in the country and in the world, there's people that are MSPs that focus on these types of things. You guys focus on retail and restaurants. Great opportunity for you guys to talk to some of those listeners. How would they engage? What should they look for in different brands that you guys compete with, and even when they're talking to your team?
It's a fantastic question. So the first thing to look for is their tenure. How long have they been doing this? Okay. We've been doing this for over 25 years. Not only have we been around for a long time, but our people have decades of experience themselves. And if you combine them, think about the amount of customers we touch. We have thousands of customers, right? And so our people get to see thousands of scenarios.
Mhm.
And so when you think that, hey, I have this problem that nobody can solve for me, wait a minute.
Yes.
We've probably seen it and we can help. So that's one thing is you have to look at the tenure of the company. The second thing to look at is their product. Are they single threaded, right? Or do they have a broader stack? Because there's no such thing as, hey, this one little box is going to meet every
All your
single
requirements.
customer's needs out there. Yeah, no. And so for Infusion Connect, one thing that we're very good at and we take pride in is that we have not been afraid to expand our portfolio. We call it the full stack, right?
Mhm.
Basically, a very complete suite of products that when you put them together end up being a solution, right? That's really what it is. And there's different pieces of the puzzle that we will bring in depending on what is specific to that customer's pain because there's no band-aid for everything. There's no one pill for it. It,
It
it
depends
does
on what
take a
they have.
little
Like we were talking about with the network, you got streaming TVs versus
you
direct TV running
abs
on very different environment, and because
boom.
of it, your requirements are going to be different. And with that,
That's
you're
correct.
going to need to design your architecture and your infrastructure. If you have
Yeah,
somebody
that's
come to
that,
you and just say, "Here, we can fix everything,"
there you
the
go.
blue pill, you probably shouldn't be doing business with them because
That's
yeah.
correct. I would say this to that. If they're focused on pitching a product, they're the wrong fit. They need to be focused on understanding your specific pain. By the
Absolutely.
way, even though we've been doing this for a long time and we have a vast portfolio of solutions to offer, we still can't fix everything.
Mhm.
And that's okay. But guess what else we have? We have an enormous network of partners that probably can. So that's the other thing to look at is not just look at the tenure and their product, but what network do they have as far as their contacts, their community? We have partners out there that do things like ourselves, for example, right? Like you guys are very specific. I don't do POSs, right? So if there's a gap, I can bring somebody in that I trust,
Hmm.
that I've worked with. I'll end with this because you're right. There's a lot of companies out there like Fusion Connect. Look at what the company's willing to. Fusion Connect specifically has, I would say, the strongest guarantees, service guarantees I've ever seen. I've been doing this since 1995. For example, we talked about that SD-WAN device that makes your network smart and secure and prioritize and that quality of service. Guess what? We have it in writing. It's in our contracts. We give you a 100% time SLA on our SD-WAN solutions. Nobody does
Yeah,
that.
no,
Everybody does 99999. They run out of nines. We do 100%. Not only do we do 100% on that, but we do 100% on our communication and collaboration solutions. So if there's UC involved, we're so confident in our infrastructure and in our redundancies that we put 100% on that. That's
that's
how I
awesome.
listen, think about it. Communications, to your point, is the lifeblood of a company. We better get behind it. And so we do that. And the last guaranteed I'll mention, because I can tell you that nobody does this, we're so confident in what we do and how we architect our solutions that we have a customer satisfaction guarantee that says, guess what? You're not happy with what we solved for you. We'll let you off the hook. Nobody's going to do that.
Hmm.
Like they're going to tie you into a contract. You're going to end up in court. You're going to have to fight them. We're not going to fight you. We've been doing this a long time. We know we can help customers. We're confident in our engineering staff, right? And we're confident in our infrastructure and in our support staff. We are so customer obsessed, literally. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot,
Yep.
but we are to the point where we're willing to say, if you're not satisfied, and it's in writing, we're going to let you off the hook. So those are probably the things to look for. That
But
was
that-
kind if I was looking for a company to solve my issues, those are the things I would look for. And so that's what we do. We provide that for.
I love that. So how do people get in touch? What's the best way to engage with Fusion Connect? What's the best way to both subscribe
Yeah.
to the podcast? Because there's also that, because you can sit and
Yes.
riff on all things technology and it's fun to sit and
Yeah.
listen. So
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
them the
Yeah.
handles on how to get in touch with you guys at Fusion Connect first and foremost.
Absolutely. So listen, fusionconnect.com, that's the website. And you can connect with us right there. We have omni-channel ways of connecting to somebody right away. And on that website, you'll be able to see everything I'm talking about. Our approach to the stack, our approach to solving customers' problem, our customer obsession with our guarantees. You'll see all that there. Tech Unmuted. Tech Unmuted is the official podcast of Fusion Connect. We are actually available on your favorite podcast platform. You can pretty much find us on every platform. And for the video portion, we are on YouTube. Just search for Tech Unmuted and subscribe. We would love to have you guys join us. We try to push episodes weekly. I love to connect personally with people. I know you do too.
I do.
Honestly, LinkedIn, Santi Cuellar. I was the first Santi Cuellar to ever secure a LinkedIn account. That's how long ago this was. Please reach out on LinkedIn. I love to connect with you. If you want to have a conversation, I promise I will provide the coffee. How's that?
Love it. Fonzie, I honestly, one, thank you for the amount of value that you provided. Whether they decide to
My
move forward
pleasure.
with you guys or not, all of the restaurateurs need to be thinking about this stuff and not just my IT
Absolutely.
guys got it or whatever else. So thank you for that. Thank you for reaching out, quite frankly, on LinkedIn, because that's how we met and have built a
Yeah.
relationship. And it's going to be fun. At some point, I'll get on your show, get to talk
Yes.
restaurant tech
I can't wait.
stories. That'll be a lot of fun. To our listeners, guys, if you guys haven't already subscribed, please do so on your favorite podcast player. Same for Restaurant Technology, guys. You can now do that. We send out once a month. We send out a newsletter with all of the shows and some show notes and those kind of things. So if you haven't done that, go to restauranttechnologyguys.com. You can subscribe to the newsletter. Santi, thank you so much. And to our listeners, make it a great day.